tree planting season doesn't start for a little while yet. It really sort of starts end of October, depending on the temperature really and how warm it is. And it carries on till say March or April. Again, it depends how warm it is and how soon the trees start coming out. So basically when the trees are dormant. Of course, if you're planting a tree from a pot, you can plant it at any time of the year, as long as you keep it watered until it's established. But for this, I'm talking about bare root trees, where you should dig the plant up and then plant it somewhere else. So these ones were done about 12 years ago, so this is nice to have these older bits on a bit where I walk through regularly, so I always see them, and it helps me get inspired to do more. But it's very good to really start thinking about tree planting now, and it's good to do all of the research and get really organised, because when it arrives, it's sometimes then a bit of a panic. So it's kind of nice to get it all worked out now. It's also good to work out the locations for where to put woodland, because it's nice to put trees where they're not going to shade anything, where they're going to provide shelter. Here we've put them all along the north facing side so that they create shelter from the cold winds but don't shade too much. And also we put it in the higher up places where they can act as a reservoir for nutrients and water, which helps the water table all down the land. And also in the really boggy places where nothing will grow, and sort of places where the soil is poor, and anywhere that's really not any good for cultivation really. So this is one site where I want to put trees. I've already planted trees so far, and it's just this little chunk here really. It's got some shrub trees in it already, so I probably won't need to add much here, and this bit doesn't need any kind of landscaping because it's already been landscaped. This whole bit just slopes down to a pond over that way, and it's got a few willows and things. There's a lime tree I put just there a few years ago, so a couple of trees that get big, kind of maybe there, and then a few shrub trees that don't exist here already, or some that do as well, so maybe a few more hazels. It's quite dry, so got to think of some shrub trees that would go quite well. It's not like a boggy place, so kind of field maples and some different kinds of sorbus and maybe wayfaring trees, things like that. So sort of it's quite a wide choice of things I can put in here, but it would just take a few little trees with the existing shrub trees that are already here just to sort of make this woodland. So this is a kind of nice easy bit. So it's very good to look around at the bits you want to plant and think how many trees I'm going to need and what type of trees I'm going to want, and make a kind of list of what you're going to use, and then think where you're going to get the trees from. Wild trees are not usually very expensive, especially considering how few you need to make an area of woodland, but many of them are very, very common and seed themselves all over the place. Like oak trees, you'd probably find an oak tree that seeded itself in your garden. You wouldn't need to buy one, and that would be the right kind of type of oak for your local area. It would be a local oak. It would be the best tree to grow. The ones that seed themselves locally are the best trees to grow, but generally the common ones you can find, or you can buy them, but the rarer ones, those are the ones you need to buy really. So things like silver birch you can find, you know. There's just loads of places I can think of just here where silver birch, alder, willows have seed themselves profusely. Hawthorn, yeah, sometimes if the conditions are right you can get loads of hawthorn, but that's sometimes better to buy hawthorn because it's always comes in these nice straight bits when you find them growing, and they're always kind of like quite a big and bulky. But they when you buy them, then just nice straight ones that can all fit in a nice pile and are easier to plant. But it's up to you really where you get them from, but it's good to have a look around and see what you've got, because you could save yourself quite a bit of money. This rowan's been in a few years. I think I got this in a sale. It was already quite big, but it's taken a few years to get established, but it's put on loads of nice berries this year, so it doesn't take long really to get established. Here the grass has been cut really, really carefully because quite a few trees have seeded themselves into the grass, and these can be transplanted in the winter, autumn. So here's a little alder tree, and it looks like a second year one. It's got like a little bit of trunk down the bottom, and then from about there upwards is all this year's growth. They're very, very fast growing, and really they are the only really dominant tree in a really boggy area, and they grow really well on riverbanks. and Alnus glutinosa. They're just perfect for anywhere boggy because they get to the height of a big tree, they anchor themselves in really well, and they'll sort of they'll mean that the forest will remain sort of tall right through the swamp and up the sides as well. So it's a really good tree to have if you've got a boggy area. But they do seed themselves incredibly easily, and we certainly don't need to ever buy alders. They just seed themselves like weeds, really, and we never have to buy them. Gorse bushes have seeded themselves here as well. Now these are very useful because if you're planting an area as woodland, this sort of happens naturally. Gorse seed themselves, shrub trees seed themselves into the gorse, and then the shrub trees eventually displace the gorse, and then the big trees eventually displace the shrub trees. So it's like a cycle, so you can sort of work with that cycle. So by planting, say, a gorse bush next to some trees you're planting, that will protect the trees and you won't need a tree guard. You can also do this with rushes. Actually, these are spiky things. They're like kind of grasses but grow in like damp places. They're quite good for protecting trees. Also bracken and loads, anything with prickles really, or anything really dense. Gorse is kind of perfect. So I shall be digging some of that out and putting that with some of the trees. Personally, I do like to plant trees just a little bit taller than the undergrowth that they're in. So here, this is like grassland here. I'd really like to plant trees this big, but of course the bigger they get, the more expensive they are. But usually you can get them for quite a low price, kind of 3 foot high. That's like ideal because they're already taller than the surrounding grasses and things, and they won't get smothered by them. But if you plant smaller ones, then you need to keep much more of an eye on them until they are taller than the surrounding vegetation. In certain places, like this disorganized, half-finished little bit of the garden here, where I've got lots of trees in pots and bits half landscaped, and I've noticed here loads of willow trees have seeded themselves, and also there's loads of silver birch trees and more alders and some hazel trees. There's all sorts here. But like here, there's just tons of little silver birch trees. I have noticed that willows, alders and silver birch in particular do really, really well on these areas of exposed subsoil. Here's a nice little alder tree there and some nice little birch. Some of them are big enough to be transplanted into long grass, others are smaller. So there's kind of a little bit of a tree nursery here. Other trees like hazels and oaks seed themselves profusely into the woods, as do beech, but I don't really find the need to plant very many beech because they seem to just arrive naturally when the forest is a certain degree established. They like to sort of seed underneath things, but I have put the odd beech here and there, like to grow up through things. But generally sort of go into a more of an early generation forest, so sort of birch and oak and the odd lime tree, the odd beech tree. But mostly what I plant is shrub trees because they thicken out really quickly and make a canopy much sooner than big trees just on their own would. And I plant a mixture of shrub trees, some that like growing under canopy, others that don't. So some will form like a prickle forest early on, and eventually, after a long time, would be overpowered by the bigger trees, and others would grow happily in the under canopy, grow with the shrub trees, and then they'd survive in the under canopy as well, sort of like hazels and guelder roses and spindles, things like that. So it's good to plant a really good variety of things. For every species of native tree that you introduce successfully and that becomes established, you introduce more species of insect and more species of wildlife that will just be attracted by all this different diversity. And so more species equals more diversity, so it's good to plant as many as you can. Some types of tree wouldn't perhaps be suitable for the location. There's always some that like different conditions, but try and get as many as you can, as much diversity as possible to attract the maximum amount of wildlife possible. And then of course, how far apart are you going to plant the trees? I mean, the bigger they are, the further apart you can plant them. They do seem to really, really like being planted in little clumps. I tend to plant the trees that I want to become big trees as one tree on its own usually, but with lots of shrub trees around it. And I plant like really thick amounts of shrub trees. But it varies from, I put them in little groups of maybe 3 or 5 and have them about a foot apart if they're little ones like that, and further apart if they're 3 foot high ones. But as far apart as they are high, really, and then have little gaps of maybe 4 feet or something between them, and leave sort of gaps where I want paths, and that seems to work quite well. And when I plant alders and birch, sometimes I plant them really, really thickly in little clumps of like 2 or 3 per spade hole, and they seem to do really, really well growing in this intense competitive environment. So there's loads of different ways you can do it, but it's good to have it all in your head, how many you need, and then you've got a little list. You've got, well, I can dig up some hazels from in there. You know, I can dig up some birch trees from over there and some alders. And if I need an oak tree, there's tons of oaks in the woods that have seeded themselves, and in the garden there's loads of them. And really, it's just the rarer trees. There's quite a dry bit there, so probably some field maples, maybe 7 field maples, and one sort of large tree, maybe a lime tree or something. If I have an oak, I don't need to get it from a shop. I can just get it from up there, but I'll decide what to have, and I might not need to buy anything. So there's probably just a few shrub trees for that area there. And now I'm going to sort of look at some other areas which I also need to plant and work out what I'd want for them. The sides of these little landscape woodland islands, for example. Here it's all been just cut out by a digger to make this big hole, but this original bit that's already got trees on was made by hand. And so recently we've been doing a bit of landscaping on here to make it a bit more shapely. And then all we need to do now is add a thin layer of topsoil and then plant some trees. But of course, not that many trees will grow in shallow topsoil, so it's going to be quite a lot of hawthorns and lots of prickly things. I've noticed that wild pears seem to grow quite well in this environment. Here I'm not planting any big trees, I'm just allowing them to seed in. Some oaks have seeded already, and some alder and some birch, but on this bit I'm just not planting any big trees, just shrub trees, and letting the big trees arrive naturally. So I'm going to need a bundle of hawthorn trees as well as some field maples for up there. Field maples wouldn't like it there, they seem to quite like deep topsoil. A lot of trees quite like the deep topsoil. But hawthorns are a very good plant that does grow in very poor soil conditions. There are some others, hazels will tolerate these conditions as well. But it's very difficult to add a thick layer of topsoil onto here. Most areas I do add at least kind of a foot of topsoil, but in some areas it's just not possible. So I just create an environment with more shallow topsoil. Naturally it does form topsoil itself, so I just think you can just plant what grows there on these very steep bits, and that should work. Again, all round this area where we're digging out the channels to separate the islands, there's alders and silver birch seed themselves. It's really good to clock where these plants are now, because when they lose their leaves they're very hard to spot. So it's good to kind of sort of make a mental note of where they all are, because when you look for them in the winter they just look like sticks, you know, amongst all the brown grass. So it's good to make a mental note of how many you've got and where they are and how big they are, etc. And that would save you loads. Down here it's a much damper bit, so I'm going to put different kinds of trees in here. And then there's this little bit down here, which is the last little bit of the north-facing side to be planted with woodland, and it just requires a little bit of landscaping. We've done most of it. There's this bank here which is half built, which is going to divide footpaths, because it's quite a narrow bit of woodland, so a bit of landscaping. You get a footpath going down this way, one going down a little valley here, and then another one going along higher up there. So I should be able to divide it into 3, and I can get the soil from literally right there, so I haven't got to carry it a long way, so it should be quite straightforward. There's an oak tree we planted there, so that tree will cover a huge amount of space. On this little bit down here there'll probably be another big tree kind of the other end of it somewhere, and the rest of it will be shrub trees, and it's going to drier and very deep soil there, so there's really could plant most types of shrubbery there. Some rowans would be nice, and some field maples and some hazels and things, and possibly some hawthorns, which are sort of growing together, and that should be really good. And then down in the dip down there, where it's damp but not boggy, Lots of silver birch trees all planted really close together, growing in a nice tangle, and I can get them all from just here. So that wouldn't cost anything at all. So here, just a few shrub trees really. I can provide the big tree myself probably, or I might need to buy a big tree depending what I get. And that's sort of fairly straightforward. It's good to be organised. It's good to get all this sorted out now, and then sort of look and see who's selling wild trees and place some orders now, because sometimes they sell out. So it's good to place your order early. You won't get them till October or November, but it's good to place the orders now, so you'll be first in line. It's so bad to be disorganised, and then it's the winter. The days are so short. It's easy for the time to go past, and then think, oh no, I've missed it for another year. It's good to get those trees in. And so now, 2 months in advance is really perfect to organise, and then you know exactly what you're doing. And if you've got your order coming, then you don't have to worry about anything. You've just got to get the land all ready. Hopefully we'll have woods all the way along the north side here, and that will be really, really good. So anyway, I hope you liked today's video. If you did, please like and subscribe. And if you press the little me, which is somewhere down there, you can see all my other videos. And if you have any questions, please do ask. And I shall see you next time.